So if you clicked on this video, I'm assuming you know what you're getting yourself into. And also just be a little bit thankful for the way that I titled this video, because the other channels, especially the ones that are bigger than me that are going to be covering this chapter, are not going to be so nice with the way that they title things. So in exchange for that, could you please just get this video to 3,000 likes? All you gotta do is just move your thumb over and like the video. That would mean a lot, thank you. Now let's just also get the huge reveal out of the way, and then of course I'll talk about the rest of the chapter in detail. But it turns out that Drive Knight is evil. No surprise there, right? And I'm not really gonna gloat about this or whatever because it doesn't really matter. I was right about some stuff, I was wrong about some stuff, and in the end about 85% of you are just gonna be like, well, I knew the whole time. It was obvious, and that's fine. I forgive you, for you know not what you do. A lot of you are suffering from hindsight bias and cryptomnesia, so it's completely understandable. It's very common, so you don't have to feel bad about it. Anyway, it also turns out that Dr. Kuseino is evil as well. It seems like he is the true leader of the organization, and that's pretty wild because this is relatively a new theory. We've been talking about Drive Knight being evil for like the last 6 years or so, 6, 7. Hey Gen Alpha, I did that meme, like the video. That's also pretty funny because in my latest One Punch Man Season 3 breakdown, which was episode 3, it comes to that sequence where Dr. Kuseino randomly shows up to Saitama's apartment because like he's going to retrieve Genos himself instead of having like a drone come and get him. And in that video I say, looking back on this sequence, it's kind of odd that this happens because it doesn't really add anything to the story other than like Dr. Kuseino just meeting Saitama. But then I also said in a covertly way, I mean I didn't outright spoil it in that video, but I was like, well, if it turns out that Dr. Kuseino is actually evil, then this sequence totally makes sense because he's like bribing Saitama with meat as he does, you know, later on, which we saw in the webcomic chapter. He did that as a way to get his data from it. But I won't get too ahead of myself. Let's get into the actual chapter itself here because it's pretty long and there's a lot to go over. So coming off at the end of the previous chapter, we saw that rampaging Genos finally found where Metal Knight's base is, or like where Metal Knight in his actual base is, because he has multiple of them. And at the same time, Metal Knight was fighting against Child Emperor, like using their robots against each other, and Genos just blitzes through them, gets into the base, and punctures through his chest. And coming into this chapter, we see that Genos is about to like blow his head off, but Child Emperor saves Metal Knight. He launches his fists at Genos, but Genos has like these cool eye lasers now and just blows them away. But this distracts him long enough for Metal Knight to counterpunch him. And it's revealed in this sequence that most of Metal Knight's body is a mechanized cyborg now. So when Genos like went through his chest in the previous chapter, he didn't really do much. As he says, some of his artificial organs and joints were damaged, but it's not fatal. He even like regenerates from this. It also turns out that the suit, or just his corporeal being, I suppose, integrates shape memory nanometal into electroviscous fluid, linking with bioelectric currents to generate instantaneous output. And according to Metal Knight's calculations, it can exert about 1/3 of Super Alloy Darkshine's power. That's pretty wild. I mean, it's not like dragon level, I guess, because Super Alloy Darkshine, really hard to say exactly how strong he is. Maybe he's like mid to high dragon. I mean, we thought he was high dragon definitively for a long time, but maybe that's not necessarily the case. I mean, maybe he is now that he's gotten his groove back, but he's obviously dragon level minimum. So like 1/3 of that, I don't know, demon somewhere around there, right? High demon, who knows? So just Metal Knight as a person, you know, not with his arsenal of robots or technology or whatever, just what he has incorporated into him is pretty strong, but not like really strong, if that makes sense. But also, this is like the latest version of the battle suit that we see the Neo heroes wear, because they initially stole this technology from Metal Knight in the first place. Then Metal Knight's pawns come into the room and start jumping Genos. Metal Knight reveals that he knew Genos was his enemy from the start. And this makes sense because Metal Knight is suspicious of everyone in the Hero Association, especially the cyborgs. But Genos easily breaks out of this, and we further see like his magnetic abilities that came with his latest upgrade that he got after Dr. Kuseino had died. And Genos is just further saying, you know, he's going to kill Metal Knight, you know, he's evil, all the lies that he had been fed essentially. And Metal Knight, pretty cool guy, he's like, hey, Isamu, which is Child Emperor's name, he's not someone you can handle, so, you know, you can get out of here. And Genos, surprisingly, is like, nah, I'm not letting Child Emperor escape either. I'm gonna kill him too. which is pretty wild. Again, this isn't like Genos turning heel or whatever. It's just that he's under such duress right now that he fully believes that Metal Knight and even Child Emperor are evil and that he must eliminate them. But Metal Knight winds up revealing that all of the robots out there, you know, in the big invasion, are just cheap knockoffs of his original Metal Knight pawns. And that in order to fully stop them, you're going to need Metal Knight himself. So, like, if you kill him, then the world is doomed, essentially. And he hypothesizes that even with Saitama's help, it still won't be enough because, in theory, there would be endless amounts of robots that would be coming, along with all of the casualties they could bring. I mean, if Saitama really wanted to, he could probably kill all of them, because if he just started doing everything seriously, you know, like serious running, serious whatever, he could just blitz around the Earth in seconds and just annihilate all of them. Metal Knight doesn't know the full extent of Saitama's powers, although he reveals in this chapter that he is very aware that Saitama is likely the one above all. He has been observing him for a while now, especially that sequence where he brought Black S and Overgrown Rover to the Hero Association and knocked out his defense robots. Speaking of Saitama, we cut over to him at the Hero Association and we see like this big organizational mothership drone thing coming in, and it's dropping off more drones. And this ship looks really interesting, right? It looks like the God Cube. It also looks like Drive Knight's box thing, his tactical rectangle or whatever that he uses for his transformations. But we've talked about this before and I'll say it again. This for sure resembles the God Cube for a reason, and it's because I believe the organization is a direct result of God's influence, the same way that the Monster Association came to be. When Psychos was trying to look into the future using Shibabawa's third eye ability, which is like a really high level Esper ability to where you can like literally look into the future, or a hypothesized future, I suppose. Almost like the way that prescience works in Dune. She saw what is implied to be God killing humanity in one way or another, and that like influenced her to start the Monster Association. The manga's continuity of these events are more fleshed out, and it leads to like the birth of Orochi, which is a monster strong enough to be used as a tribute to bring God back. That isn't exactly the lore in the webcomic because there is no Orochi in the webcomic, but it's essentially all connecting to the same thing. And one way or another, God did something, which will be revealed later on, that led to the creation of the organization. And later on, it's going to be revealed that Dr. Cuseno is very likely to be the leader of the organization. So Dr. Cuseno is involved with God in some way. And I'll get more into that once we come to the Dr. Cuseno stuff. But anyway, we see another serious move from Saitama here, and he just does a serious squat on this ship and just plunges it essentially into space. But they wind up dropping off these monsters who are said to be the organization's prized enhanced monster squad, and each one of them is level dragon, and they claim that their group alone is stronger than the entire Monster Association. Is this like literally true? I don't know. Granted, the Monster Association in the webcomic continuity is not nearly as strong as the manga continuity. There is no Orochi, there's no Platinum S, there's no Vomited Pure Ugly. I don't know if Sage Centipede is technically a part of the Monster Association. That's more so just a direct creation of God. But maybe it is true. I mean, one's writing is kind of weird sometimes, not in like a bad way, but sometimes he just puts unreliable narrations out there, and I guess he just wants the audience to decide for themselves. But I guess this just more or less means they're really strong. At minimum, they are parallel to the Monster Association as a whole. But Saitama just annihilates all of them with a new move, two-handed consecutive normal punches, which is just like, you know, this. I guess Saitama's Gum Gum Gatling equivalent, maybe. But after this, Metal Knight starts revealing to Genos the truth about everything, about how he's being deceived by Dr. Cuseno and Drive Knight, how he's just a pawn for them. Then we come back to Saitama in the aftermath of him taking out the enhanced monster squad, and we see this one drone start talking to him. Then it's revealed that this drone is actually Drive Knight. Then Metal Knight reveals that Drive Knight is an AI that he originally created and was stolen and had his orders rewritten. So I originally thought that Drive Knight was a cyborg, like the Mad Cyborg, of course, and that he may have been Metal Knight's like son originally or something. But no, that is not the case. Drive Knight is just an AI, but he was created by Metal Knight, so close enough. I don't know. But we kind of knew this was the case anyway, because when Drive Knight is lying to Genos, which is like 15 chapters ago or something like that, he says that the Mad Cyborg came from Metal Knight anyway, which we assumed was a little bit of truth sprinkled into those lies. And that essentially all of the machine gods that we have seen throughout the series are based on the AI from Drive Knight. And Drive Knight himself is Machine God G0, which we suspected because Drive Knight reveals to Genos a couple chapters back that his name is Zero. And I was thinking like, oh, he's G0. Because we saw in the manga at least that the machine gods go by like G number. Like we've just seen in season 2 and season 3, there's like G4, G5. So it all starts with someone, and that is Drive Knight G0. However, they alter Drive Knight's code into thinking that he was like a hero and that he couldn't attack humans, which is pretty smart because that's how he would continue to hide in plain sight. Throughout the series, we see that Drive Knight is very suspicious and clearly lying about things and has ulterior motives, but sometimes he does do oddly altruistic things, which I guess was one trying to not fully make it obvious that Drive Knight was evil, but it makes sense because this was a part of Kusenos' plan. He had to have this coding in Drive Knight or else, you know, he would just be evil and people would realize, oh, hey, that guy's killing people, or hey, that guy's doing bad things. Maybe we shouldn't trust him. But in this way, him doing good hero work and just being very vigilant made the Hero Association believe that he was a great hero, because that was the assumption that they had up until this point. And of course, that's why he believes Drive Knight is evil and all that stuff, because it was information that was fed to him. The same way that Dr. Kuseno fed all of the other disinformation to Genos. And on top of that, this is why Drive Knight needed Genos to kill Metal Knight, and why he wasn't just going to do it himself because of that parameter to not harm humans. Because even if he did find Metal Knight's base, which he did, he would have had to tell Genos where it was anyway. But while Metal Knight is dropping all of this exposition and dialogue trying to convince Genos of the truth, he's also tracking who the mastermind of the organization is at the same time. He says that the enemy has applied some clever encryption to their command signals as an anti-tracing measure. But thanks to their flashy, large-scale deployment, decryption is progressing rapidly. We're just one step away from reaching the mastermind behind these heinous acts, the puppet master who has skillfully remained hidden for so many years. Just a little more. And Genos is slowly starting to come through. I mean, he still doesn't believe Metal Knight, but at least he's trying to listen to him and he's asking questions like, there's no way that you saw the disastrous state of the world and didn't act. Because Genos, even before he was told by Drive Knight that Metal Knight was his enemy, was suspicious of Metal Knight because of the whole meteor sequence. Back in the beginning of the series, you know, that big disaster level dragon meteor was going to hit Z City. And Genos, Bang, and then later Saitama were like the only ones that showed up trying to defend against it, until Metal Knight also showed up, but he just wound up saying like, this is just for my weapons test. I don't really care about the meteor really hitting the city. Because once his missiles didn't really do anything, he kind of just pieced out of there. And Genos was like, you know, what the heck? What's wrong with this guy? He's not really all about justice. I'm suspicious of him. And then when Drive Knight was like, hey, Metal Knight's your enemy, he was like, that totally makes sense to me. And in response to that, Metal Knight's like, it's not that I don't act, but I'm always thinking. Humanity took damage this time as well, but it won't be wiped out. However, if I were to lose to him, Dr. Kuseno, the world would end immediately. And this goes back to what Metal Knight was revealing to Child Emperor in the previous chapter, when he was trying to tell him why he acts the way that he does. He says, as a result, even if my justice is not understood by them and suspicious eyes are turned towards me, that is a trivial phenomenon to be tolerated. It takes time for ordinary people to comprehend a genius's thinking. And coming back to his current conversation with Genos, he says, if I were the kind of person who could be shaken by having the lives of individual citizens taken hostage, he, Dr. Kuseno, would have had much easier time ruling humanity in an even more cruel way. And I guess this goes into like Metal Knight's pragmatism by saying like, it wouldn't really be a smart tactical move for me to just devote all of my time, effort, and resources into saving just some hostages, because if I were to do that, then I would be diverting away from the main post of Earth, essentially, letting my guard down, and that's when Dr. Kuseno and the organization would come in and try to take everything over, which is essentially what they're doing. But it's at this point that Metal Metal Knight pinpoints where the mastermind is. And he's like, Genos, if you want to know the truth, will you come too? And Genos is like, don't screw with me. That mad cyborg that you created destroyed my family, my town. That's right, there's no doubt about it. You were there at that time. That image of you is burned into my eyes. This is fascinating because this is the first time we're seeing this. We never knew that Genos had this deep of memories about it, and we never knew that he saw something like this. However, Metal Knight is like, that's a manufactured memory. How terrible, Genos. So you were truly a victim all along. Whoa. I guess this is revealing the mad cyborg isn't real. It was never real in the first place. It was just a manufactured memory. Now that's not entirely confirmed. It more so could mean that the image of Metal Knight that is burned into his memory is manufactured, and then maybe the mad cyborg is real. Maybe it is Drive Knight, or maybe it's even Genos himself, which goes back to the original theory that we had on him, which was like 7 years ago. It's one of the first theories I ever put up on the channel, actually. And I say that because where did Dr. Kuseno ultimately get Genos? Did he just abduct him from his family and then just start working on him and then change his memories around? That remains to be seen. I mean, it's going to be revealed eventually once, Genos confronts Dr. Kuseno, which we'll get to. But at this point, Metal Knight realizes that Drive Knight is taking hostile action against a human in the form of Saitama. And he's like, wait, the command shutdown isn't working? My robust safety program overwritten? He managed this with his brain? He surpasses me? If that's the case, surely I could see the research data that he stole from me wasn't just AI, but also cyberization? So he ceased being human long ago. Kuseno! So this could mean that Kuseno himself has been cyberized, or also Drive Knight is as well. I think he's more so talking about Kuseno here, because he's like, so he ceased being human long ago. And this whole cyberized thing goes into what he was talking to Child Emperor about in the previous chapter. When Metal Knight is continuing to talk to Child Emperor, revealing that he's not such a bad guy, he says, the time limit for humanity's extinction is closing in right on our doorstep. That's why I'm working hard to reinforce the military might of justice. I have no time to bother with trivial issues. And Child Emperor is like, lack of ethics and humanity. Have you developed side effects from cyberization? And Metal Knight says, the ultra advanced AI program we were once developing together before stopping part way. At the time, we developers thought that completing it would be difficult without cyberizing ourselves, and gave up once. But as you suspected, I again focused and committed myself to developing that AI alone. My humanity hasn't changed at all. I haven't resorted to cyberization either. Without mechanization or AI assistance, what's packed in here are active brain cells running solely on biologically originated electrical cells. You and I both misjudge the true value of the human brain. The capabilities of an AI that converges on uniform answers through collective learning and the human brain are different in quality. Every individual's brain that has accumulated effort and experience exhibits a unique creative power. It is the human brain that holds infinite potential. That's the conclusion I reach. But that suffering also holds the potential to break through the ceiling. That completed AI may have become something extremely close to a human, but he has a different ceiling than humans. He'll surely suffer. That man, he's been after my brain since long ago. So this whole time he was talking about Dr. Kuseno. And I talked about this in the previous review as well, but I think this is why he's using Genos the way that he has. He realized that Drive Knight was a failed experiment because he's entirely AI, but he needed Genos, who still has a brain, to break through that ceiling and become as strong as he is by manipulating him with all of these false memories and narratives. But also, it's being revealed in both of these chapters that Dr. Kuseno has cyberized himself, integrating AI into his consciousness. And I think this is probably how he's being influenced by God. I thought before that it was probably Drive Knight that had this affliction happen to them, but now it seems like it's Dr. Kuseno. And the theory still could hold true that maybe Dr. Kuseno came across a God cube and tried to reverse engineer that or integrate it into technology. And once he did that, it infected his mind or whatever with the cyberization possibly, and then that led him to becoming evil and creating the organization. Now, I'm not 100% sure of that, more so 70%. And I say that because it could just be simply cyberization that caused him to become fully evil or whatever. But I'm also thinking that God has to be incorporated into this because the way that the ship and Drive Knight's rectangle thing looks, and it's not just me grasping at straws or whatever. We have seen before, even in the webcomic, webcomic that the ninja village looks like a god cube. And, 5 years ago or whatever, when that was first revealed, I said at that time, it probably has something to do with God because it looks like a freaking god cube. And it turns out that was true. They straight up had a god cube inside of the ninja village, trying to see who was strong enough to succumb to its influence, the same way that Empty Void himself had. And considering that they look just the same, this is not a coincidence. Now, also that being said, we are coming to the end of the second big saga of One Punch Man. The first big long saga was like the Monster Association and all that stuff. The second one is like the organization. And then I assume the third one will be all about God. That's going to be like the final saga of the series. And also, we haven't really gotten too much into God in the webcomic, believe it or not. That stuff's way more fleshed out in the manga. We haven't even seen Blast currently in the story in the webcomic yet. We've only seen him in that one flashback with Tatsumaki. So I think a pretty cool way for one to start the big final saga of this series would be for Dr. Kuseno himself to be the spark of it. Like, it's revealed that he had a vision of God or the God Cube or something like that, and then that's when God starts getting talked about and fleshed out. And then I guess Blast will come into the fray as well, because, Blue is involved in this too, and Blue is the son of Blast. So I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this arc, Blast comes through, Dr. Kuseno talks about God, or just somebody talks about God, and then we get this massive exposition dump from either Blast or Dr. Kuseno about God, and then that can begin the final long saga of One Punch Man. And if you're wondering, why does God need to create the organization in the first place? Well, it's the same reason that he started the Monster Association. It's all as a means to overtake humanity and to resurrect himself. So the Monster Association was going to overtake humanity with monsters and whatnot, as well as turning humanity into monsters, as well as producing Orochi, a monster strong enough to complete the ritual to resurrect God. But as we're with the organization, they would overtake humanity with cyborgification, as well as augmenting monsters themselves, as we've seen them do many times before, through collecting data and technology and whatnot, and that would produce a monster strong enough to bring back God, or bring him back through technology or something. I mean, we even saw in the manga that Drive Knight collected some of Orochi's cells before he left the Monster Association War, and that just didn't randomly happen. Yes, Drive Knight was collecting it for the organization, but unknowingly he was doing it as a pawn to God. But anyway, back to where we were in the chapter. So with the help of Child Emperor, Metal Knight's able to bring up some footage of what's going on at the Hero Association with Drive Knight fighting against Saitama, and Genos is seeing this in real time. And he's like, why is Drive Knight fighting Saitama, sensei? And Metal Knight's like, he's the same as you. Drive Knight is also one of Kuseno's pawns. You're all assisting in the evil scientist Kuseno's plan to destroy the world. And Genos is like, well, Dr. Kuseno was attacked and died last night by the assassins that you sent. Metal Knight's like, that was just a charade meant to fire your will to fight. And that's what we talked about in the Dr. Kuseno being evil theory video. Let me also point out that I didn't come up with Dr. Kuseno being evil. However, everything else that I talked about in that video was organically from the vacuum of my mind. Just rereading through certain parts of the series and adding things up. Also, the whole thing about Dr. Kuseno's name meaning Dr. Stench, that was like a dead giveaway by one from the beginning, which is hilarious. But ultimately, my reasoning was like, first of all, why is Dr. Kuseno so bent on getting Saitama's data? I thought, well, I guess that's just a device for the organization to ultimately get it, which in a roundabout way is true. And then I was also like, well, Dr. Kuseno died kind of unceremoniously, like in an unvery one writing type of way. It was like too anticlimactic, and I kept saying we didn't know anything about Dr. Kuseno. There was so much more that he had to be said. There was so much more that needed to be revealed. That was true. I mean, Metal Knight himself even goes on to say that to Genos later on in the sequence. He's like, think about it. What do you really know about Dr. Kuseno? And even Genos can't deny that. He's like, I guess I don't know anything. And also, it's revealed what we were talking about for many years now, and it's that Tatsumaki and Flash aren't involved in this arc because of manipulation from the organization. They sent them away at the beginning of this arc. They somehow gave some bunk information to the Hero Association. Maybe it's bunk, I don't know, maybe it's real because they're still away. But it was like, hey, Flash, it turns out that there's this rogue ninja organization called the Fallen Masses or the Fallen Ashes or whatever. Hey, you're gonna have to go take them out or investigate them or whatever. And Flash, sorry, say less, bye. And then as for Tatsumaki, kind of like the same thing. They were like, oh, hey, there's this rogue Esper organization called Otento. You need to go investigate them or take them out. She was like, okay, say even less, bye. Now that's probably gonna tie into the manga's continuity very well because Tsukuyomi, the Esper organization, has already been fleshed out there. But this is very like Marvel Civil War, you know, getting Hulk away from Earth so that he's not involved in that stuff because it would have just created too much chaos. But as for the organization, they're like, yeah, Tatsumaki and Flash are way too powerful. Tatsumaki by herself probably could have just soloed the robot army, and Flash is so fast that he could have just beheaded all of them instantly. But this could also be a great way for one to integrate God not only into the Monster Association and the organization, but also into Otento or Tsukuyomi, as well as the Ninja Village in the webcomic. Because in the manga, Tsukuyomi is associated with God as well. We saw that they had a cube in their organization in Tatsumaki's flashback, and that they're creating Espers artificially. And this is also, you know, how to bring back God in some way. So when Tatsumaki and Flashy Flash come back into the story in the webcomic, they can just be brought up to speed through their own little side quests that they did. Flashy Flash can find out how God is connected to the Ninja Village through the Fallen Masses or whatever, and Tatsumaki the same with Otento. But going further, Metal Knight says to Genos that you were upgraded with the role of attacking me from the beginning. I've known him before you. That atrocious villain is that kind of man. He's probably even listening to this conversation. Dr. Kuseno is alive. So yeah, that confirms it. Of course, he didn't die. It was just a ruse to make Genos' potential come out more, I suppose. And, you know, to further send him to kill Metal Knight. And this also confirms what we were talking about before about how Metal Knight knows Dr. Kuseno and vice versa. I mean, it's not really explored too much in this chapter outside of that dialogue right there, but I guess they were either colleagues at one point or they were just working in the same field of study, and maybe there was some beef there, or maybe they came from the same technology school or whatever. Possibly. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But for sure, they have history together. Then we come to the part of where Genos starts freaking out because Metal Knight is just making too much sense about things. And he just busts through the ceiling. And it's like, where did he go? I mean, we can assume that either he's going to where he thinks Dr. Kuseno is, or he's going to where Saitama is fighting Drive Knight in front of the Hero Association. But speaking of that, we're coming to Drive Knight straight up fighting Saitama here, which is something I did not expect. His attacks at first, of course, are useless against Saitama, and Saitama is trying to understand what's going on here because he's under the assumption that Drive Knight is an S-class hero. And Drive Knight's initial transformations are just nothing because, you know, it's freaking Saitama. And we come to this hilarious sequence, which, man, I love one so much when he does stuff like this. Drive Knight reveals that he has a perfect form achieved by incorporating the secret biological data of King, who is said to be the strongest living being on the planet, which apparently he collected from King, like working out in the gym, because we saw that he's like working out, doing push-ups and stuff recently. He's actually been trying to become strong and not just lean on the facade of him being the strongest anymore. But as Drive Knight transforms into his King mode, he's like, so strong, my power's draining away. Release. It seems that King had some kind of mysterious malfunction. Don't tell me that King foresaw this and deliberately let fake biological data from weakening the body get stolen. Oh, I love it. I love that he just decided to put this in here. It also makes me think that Drive Knight might have a face turn, which I did not expect. Because Saitama, first of all, is just apprehensive of killing Drive Knight here. And continuing to listen to Drive Knight's rhetoric about delivering justice and giving orders to take down Saitama and everything, he's thinking like, oh, you know, you're kind of just a victim of your own programming here. It's the creator of you who's the real villain. He's like, I'm telling you, I'm not the one that you should be facing. If you're serious, try thinking for yourself once. Are you a robot? And Drive Knight just straight up lays his cards on the table. He's like, that's right, I am a robot. Hero AI Drive Knight. My real name is Machine God G Series 0. And Saitama in this sequence is thinking pretty level-headed. He's like, oh, you're not a human? Meaning that you were created with a setting that genuinely makes you believe you're a hero. And he starts slapping him on the head like he's like some kind of device from the 90s or something. And he's like, it's common knowledge that hitting a malfunctioning appliance makes it work again. But what about you? Can't you be fixed somehow with that faulty programming of yours? Then he just flicks in the forehead. But this isn't enough to fully wake up Drive Knight. And Drive Knight reveals that this is an abnormal form born from your biological data and combat observations. I'll be destroyed, but you won't get away unscathed. Limiter removed. Tactical transformation Saitama, where we get a translation note here. The kanji reads Disaster King and is actually written as the alternate pronunciation Saigyoku. He transforms into like his ultimate Saitama form here, and he winds up looking more like what the Mad Cyborg was envisioned to be. And we see the crack in his forehead from Saitama flicking him resembles the crater in the moon from Boros kicking Saitama there. Now that didn't happen in the webcomic, but I do think it's a one-for-one comparison, of course, which ultimately lines up to being the Eye of God, which, you know, further makes me think that yes, all of this is a result of God in the end. And speaking of eye, Drive Knight's singular eye starts to look more like an actual eye now. And remember, talking about this for a couple years now, singular eye in One Punch Man means bad, means God. But after this, he's like, I can feel something inside me. Is this myself? And he's like, thank you, Saitama. I have now become special. And he winds up punching Saitama, and it looks like it's going to do something, but it doesn't. And Saitama's like, I guess it didn't work. A program that can't even choose what justice is for itself, that really pisses me off, you know? The real bad guy is the one who made you. And then Drive Knight's like, Saitama full max genocide punch. And he winds up punching Saitama on the head, but Saitama, of course, is too strong, shatters his hand in the process in this really awesome panel from One. And Saitama just gives him a stiff punch to the gut and blows him apart. And he's like, rest now. And that's where the chapter ends. So, wow. What a chapter. Holy crap. So, how strong is Drive Knight in his Saitama form or his Disaster King or Saigyoku form? Hard to really say because he's not really giving Saitama much of a challenge here, not even a Boros level challenge. So I don't know if he's above Dragon. I mean, on paper, it seems like he would be above Dragon at this point, but I don't know. I mean, he's definitely high Dragon, I guess, maybe, but he's not really taking a stiff punch from Saitama either. And also, I forgot to point out, Drive Knight saying that this is an abnormal form born from your biological data. This, of course, goes back to when Dr. Kuseno was taking the data from Saitama the night that he died, quote unquote. And I was always thinking like, man, this has got to go somewhere. It's going to make a robot, integrates this into themselves, and they're going to wind up fighting Saitama as they have. But it wasn't as competitive as I thought it was going to be. I mean, you can't really like recreate Saitama's strength by just taking his biological data because his limiter was removed. And despite Drive Knight literally saying limiter removed, he doesn't mean it the literal sense that Dr. Genos explains it. He's kind of just saying that his own limiter of power has been removed. Not the limiter itself, because it's a freaking AI. He doesn't have a limiter. But anyway, is Saitama killing Drive Knight here? No. I mean, he blew him apart, but we can see that the top half of him is still intact, especially his head. And also, just, he needs to talk more, he needs to explain more things. And also, I'm sure Genos is going to show up here soon, and he'll talk to Genos. And also, like I said, there might be some kind of face turn from Drive Knight here. Like, maybe Metal Knight also shows up and is able to undo whatever kind of tampering that Kuseno did to Drive Knight, and, like, bring the real Drive Knight through, you know, the original AI that Metal Knight had created. And we might actually just get the real Drive Knight. Like, he's actually like a good guy and he's trying to be a hero for justice, like what Metal Knight initially envisioned. But yeah, let me know what you think about all of this in the comments, guys. Wow, if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much, because it's probably gonna suck editing this, because, you know, it's pretty early in the morning now and I'm hoping to get this out in a couple hours. So like the video, guys, and subscribe. And yeah, let the war in the comments begin. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you in the next one.